Hi, it's Donald Davidoff, co-founder and CEO of Real Estate Business Analytics, here for yet another episode of The People Behind the Performance, where I sit down with key leaders and disruptors in our industry to dive into what's really driving the real estate industry's success, the role data plays into it, and frankly, to tell some stories about the people behind it all. So today's guest is Jared Miller, who joined RedPeak as Chief Operating Officer in 2018. He brings more than 20 years of multifamily experience to that team and has held executive and ownership positions at firms including Homestead Development Partners, Innovative Real Estate, the Bainbridge Companies, Lane Company, then CF Real Estate, now part of RKW, right?
RPM Living.
RPM Living bought them, yes. Sorry about that. And he was actually at RedPeak early in his career as well. He's got experience in conventional, affordable, and student housing, including operations, asset management, marketing, acquisitions, and development. Welcome, Jared. Let's dive right in.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. As you think about the state of the industry today, what's on your mind? What's got you excited, and what might have you a little bit scared?
I think there's a few things we could talk about here. One, you look at the talent gap that exists today, and that's highly concerning. You have, a group of people that are nearing the end of their careers, ready to retire, and you have the newbies coming into the business, but there's this compression in the middle. That's a bit concerning. Also, just recruiting new talent. Selling multifamily as a true career opportunity has been a real challenge. And I think just thinking of the markets and where things are today, I feel like this is history repeating itself in some ways. We're saying that, the crystal ball is very cloudy. We came through a pandemic. We said that every year. We had a great year this year. And then looking at next year, recession, not recession, what does that mean for some of these submarkets, micro markets, and MSAs? Because it's not going to be the same application across the country. So, those are some of the things that are really keeping me awake at night right now.
Yeah, your comment about the industry leadership changing over. I mean, there are companies like Avalon, Bay, and Equity Residential that have had some change. But, the CEO at Mid-America, the CEO at Camden, both great companies, they were the CEOs when I joined the industry in 1999.
Right.
So that I hadn't really thought about that. And, kudos to those CEOs; they do a great job. But that is a very interesting observation. So you talked about making real estate a career choice. I'm really curious, how did you start out in the industry? How did you get captured by this crazy little business we call rental housing?
I'm one of those people that has a fairly common story, I feel like, at this point. I started in multifamily in college as a part-time leasing professional for a predecessor to Aimco. And it was actually, I had gone to school, have a degree in business, had minored in real estate, decided to get my real estate license while in college, thinking that everyone would want to buy a house working with a 19-year-old realtor. It didn't really happen. So I switched gears. I liked the real estate idea. And I worked my way through school. I put myself through school and found an opportunity to part-time. And it's funny, the hiring manager calls me up after 2 interviews and said, you're really not the person I want to hire, but they said no. So I'm going to give you a shot.
Well,
so long story short.
Maybe not the most professional HR person, but at least you got the gig.
Correct. And I had a moment early in my career at that first property. It was at the time that Aimco was buying NHP, and there was just some turmoil and not a lot of support. And I think I had 4 different regional managers over a year. And a company, a woman who ran Edwards Companies in Columbus, Ohio, Edwards Communities, came in and shot me, came back 30 minutes later and asked what the heck I was doing, if I was going to stay in multifamily, if I had a career path and a desire. And that for me was the aha moment. And I'm hoping that those of us that have had those experiences give it to other people. We find those superstars, point them out, help pull them forward, and keep them in this business because the opportunities are endless.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. So you, as I mentioned in your bio, you've worked at a number of different companies, boomeranged at RedPeak. When you look back, who has your most influential, or who was your most influential professional mentor, or maybe a couple?
I had a few. So,
Mhm,
I was really lucky, in particular during my years at Lane Company, that
mhm,
I was in this nebulous role. It was
mhm,
marketing sometimes, it was business development, it was operations, and I had an RVP that
mhm.
just kept throwing me into roles and into situations that honestly maybe I shouldn't have been in,
Yeah,
but it was sink or swim.
yeah.
And I look back at what she did for me, and that really did change my trajectory.
Mhm.
She's one person. And I was doing pro formas for acquisitions at 21, 22 years old,
Uh,
um, for stuff that we bought. And then I would be holding my breath, praying that it was all correct because I was new.
Yeah.
Um, but I've been fortunate to work with people all throughout the years that have really pulled me out of my comfort zone, that have given me
Mhm,
new opportunities. And, there are so many people I could mention, but I think she was really the first. And it was
mhm.
also the most arduous process for interviews I've ever been through. I think I
Mhm.
interviewed for 6 months before my
Wow.
start date.
Uh-huh. Fascinating. So, bringing it back a little more to contemporary times,
Mhm.
when you're looking at RedPeak, maybe for the benefit of the audience, explain who RedPeak is, because you guys
Sure.
have kind of a unique portfolio in the industry, very focused portfolio, as it were. So explain that, and then what do you see as kind of the biggest challenges facing you in RedPeak right now?
Happy to. So, Red Peak is a Denver-based, primarily Metro Denver focused multifamily owner, developer, and operator. We've got 53 different communities. It's a little interesting because you think 53, but we have about 4,000 apartments.
Mhm.
So, our communities range from 9 units to almost
Uh,
600. And we operate centrally, meaning we have an urban core portfolio in the urban neighborhoods of Denver, Capitol Hill specifically, that we
mhm,
operate centrally, centralized leasing, and then
mhm,
centralized hubs from a management and a maintenance perspective. And then we have our suburban standalone communities, in the Denver Tech Center or Cherry Creek. And we're also a developer. So we're working on a ground up development right now in the Lowry submarket,
mhm.
high-end townhomes, really to cater to that SFR renter,
Okay.
as best we can. It's a tough
Mhm.
market to break into, but if you
Yeah.
look at our portfolio over the last couple of years, our most successful communities have been these townhouse properties.
Mhm.
Coming out of the pandemic, especially, they
Yeah.
never missed a beat.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, what are the big challenges facing you in the next year or so?
I think part of it is like a lot of what we're facing as an industry is back to that talent issue, is
Mhm,
in particular the skilled trades.
mhm,
Hiring the right maintenance professionals is a challenge. We have a
mhm,
great culture at Red Peak. We're culture forward, but that means a lot to all of our team members, but probably a little less to the maintenance team. They're a little bit more focused on, where can they go to have enough support, make what they need to make. It's been a little bit more challenging to recruit for those roles for the last couple of
mhm,
years. We've seen the exodus of, those skilled laborers over to
mhm.
construction, where they could make a little bit more money for a while. The hope is we're starting to see that skilled person come back.
Yeah.
And as an organization, we've taken a number of steps to, ensure we're taking care of our team members on the maintenance side, but we're also providing a great training platform. So we've
Mhm.
revamped our maintenance structure. We have maintenance tech 1, 2, and 3 based on certifications and experience, allowing our
Yeah.
team members to know their growth path.
Yeah.
And then also from a training perspective, we're investing a lot of money. We have a maintenance training center. I don't know of another company our size that has that
Yeah.
at their disposal. And then we're getting ready to launch VR training, so virtual
Yeah.
reality training as well.
Cool. I've always described Red Peak as a 5,000 unit company that behaves or acts like a 15,000 unit company in terms of what you
Yeah.
guys invest in. I'm curious because you're talking about skilled trades.
Mhm.
Do you think some of the changes in immigration policy have actually affected that? Because I mean, both politics and pandemic, you know, let's stay away from the politics of the border.
Mhm.
Legal immigration is down
Right.
significantly in the last few
It is.
years. Yeah, that's definitely affected it. Very, very interesting.
I,
Okay.
I would definitely agree with that, Donald. I think, there's, whether it's direct or indirect, there's a trickle
Mhm.
down effect
Right.
when you're looking for skilled trades. And, I think we've done a really good job, and I feel confident that we're in a better spot than a lot of other companies. But it's a struggle, and especially when you think about those team members at peak times of the year for move-ins or snow removal or what, I mean, just you add that pressure to it. It's just a huge focus for us.
Well, and unfortunately, it's sort of a Sisyphean task, right? You're great now, but the rock's going to roll back down the hill, next month or 6 months from now. So you're sort of never done with that. That's a fascinating angle, and people focus so much on rent and revenue and leasing. Obviously, operators like yourself know the painful side on the service and maintenance side.
And I think another thing to mention is just the pressure on the expense side of the business. I mean, it is unbelievable what you're seeing, whether it's utilities, whether it's turn costs for us have just been exorbitantly high because, these turn partners are facing the same labor issues that we are. They can't find enough people. And you're seeing, you talk about rent growth being as strong as it's been, but turn cost is dramatically higher as a percentage increase.
Yeah, that'll be interesting because if that path continues, all of a sudden the days of, well, I don't mind if someone leaves because at least I'll get the rent increase compared to what I was offering on renewal. That would be very interesting. If that equation changes, that's a fundamental shift in how you run your business.
Well, and we're having those conversations, actually using BI to say, okay, if we're getting a 4% or 5% increase, does that even cover turn cost? When you think about average days vacant and the amount of time it's taking our people, it's a real conversation today.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And obviously, our world of data is really critical. So let me shift gears a little bit, but still on your background. So here's a favorite question of mine. Okay. What's one thing that 2022 Jared Miller knows about the business that the Jared Miller who joined the business 20 plus years ago didn't know, and you wish you could have told, 2000 Jared about?
The first thing that comes to mind is you think about yourself early in a career, and when you hit these stumbling blocks, whether it's the economy or something else, but then you look back at those 20 years later and realize how short-lived they were. It's probably that as challenging as things may be at the moment, that moment is truly a blip on the radar over time. I think that's one. And two, just how critical it is to take your time and hire the right people.
Yeah, no, it's funny. The first part you talk about, I just had Friedrich Nietzsche, right, flashing in my mind. That which does not kill makes us stronger. And, I learned the hard way the same lesson about hiring people. I remember, I think the first 10 people I hired, I was, maybe 40% good, and just felt like I thought, hey, I'm smart. Why can't I figure this out? And then I suddenly realized, I kept looking at the positives in people, and I switched gears and interviewed for the negatives. And all of a sudden, if I interviewed for the reasons not to hire someone, whoever survived, I had a much better hit rate. I don't know. Do you have any little tricks of the trade? You've hired more people than I have.
Yeah, that's a great approach. One, I never hire anybody like myself. I don't. I really look for that balance. We hired a portfolio director about 8 months ago, and I met with some amazing people. I think I interviewed 20 people for that role, and I landed on somebody at the end of the day that is very different than me. There were a couple people I was like, wow, we're extremely similar. That would have been the easy path to go down. So we also plot all of our team members on a scale and show kind of on a wheel, basically the DISC assessment, but that shows how things are balanced amongst the team. So when I'm out there hiring, I'm looking for somebody that fills the gap that exists today.
Got it. No, that's really wise. And you're right. It's so easy to just inadvertently hire people who are like you. I like that person. It resonates. Seems like a smart guy or gal or whatever. It takes effort to intentionally hire differently. Let's go ahead and switch gears and talk a little bit about what's near and dear to Reba's heart, of course, which is data. What does data-driven decision-making mean to you?
Well, it really makes me happy because for so long, this industry's made decisions based on that gut feeling, kind of in the seat of our pants. And it's just not the right direction to go. And what's surprising to me is when you have a direction in mind based on that gut reaction, and then you look at the data, rarely does it all line up. That's what's been interesting to us as we've rolled out, business BI through Reba, and really tried to focus on decision making that made sense. But it's also about, training our team to do the same thing. So if we're saying BI is really important to us as an organization, but leadership isn't utilizing it to make critical decisions, how do we expect anybody else to do the same?
Yeah. No, our first customer, the tipping point for them was when their president used Reba at a board meeting. Actually told everybody, you can't put together a deck. You have to put together screenshots or tell me where in Reba you want to show stuff. And then he showed it to the board. The board started asking questions, and in real time he could filter for this and go look at that. And all of a sudden, the speed at which you can understand things really came through.
Yes.
Yeah. So to talk a little bit about how RedPeak manages performance. I mean, when we were prepping for this, you were telling me one story that I thought was really worth sharing as well. About sort of the importance of focusing on, fewer key metrics instead of getting lost in the 500.
So one of our concerns as we've really focused on BI as an organization is to narrow that focus. Because if you have different executives, different departments looking at different KPIs, suddenly that all rolls down to the site level. And suddenly they're getting questions on 500 different metrics.
Yeah.
And then their job becomes answering the questions on the 500 metrics versus being strategic. So as an organization, we sat down last fall and said, okay, let's think about all the information that's suddenly at our fingertips. What is the North Star? What matters the most? And for us, it's not just hitting budget numbers and all of that. It's, what is that NOI ratio? So NOI to income, is that healthy, not healthy? Can we set some targets by product type? That way, what we're saying is we're going to watch one thing. We think this illustrates the health of the investment. How you get there as, a community manager or portfolio director is up to you. There's a million levers you can pull. You figure out how to get there, but this is what we're going to look at. We want to see that, NOI ratio of 70%. How are you going to get there if you're at 67? That's really changed the conversation because it's become less about digging and digging and digging and digging and more about, okay, I can see it at a quick glance where we are on a portfolio level, property level, or even entire company.
Yeah. How do you prep and develop those community managers, regional portfolio managers to do that? Because when I was listening to you, I was thinking like, that's really brilliant because now you're having conversations about the business as opposed to, somebody trying to answer a question on a single metric. So on the one hand, that's brilliant. On the other hand, most people in this industry have been sort of trained to just respond to the question. Now you're really asking people to drive their business.
Right.
How do you go about, getting your people able to do that?
So it's a mind shift. And even for myself, I think about the dashboards I look at now versus all the reports I used to look at before and try to poke holes. We're developing training. So we started at the top level, home office, saying, okay, North Star, this is what it is. Can we all rally behind it? And can we put all of our desires to dig in aside and say, we're really going to focus on this one item. Right. So what we're now doing, and this is an entirely new concept for our company, we're developing training that will roll out in 2023 so that not just the managers understand, everyone at the site level understands, down to the housekeepers, the leasing professionals, the service techs understand their impact on that. Right. So we're going to roll out training and really hit that home. But as an organization, we're also setting a goal. It's not just the budget saying, okay, we want to get to X% by the end of 2023. And we're building an entire campaign around that.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So looking ahead, what do you think the future of data analytics in our industry looks like?
Well, one, I'm excited for where we are today because we actually have something and something that's meaningful and real time. It's not lagging 30 or 60 days. But I think the next component to this is more predictive, saying, okay, not just on the leasing side, because that's there today. If you need to be at 95%, you can work through the platforms and understand how to get there. But it really helps predict marketing spend and other things. And, how all of this ties together with budgeting and forecasting is huge. Every company struggles through this every year. You've got the 30 tab Excel file that you try to update annually. This is going to allow us to be a lot more strategic and go through and say, okay, here's where we are today, but let's actually project out 60, 90, 120 days at this point, where it's been such a manual process before.
Yeah, I mean, with the, not to get too commercial, but with a database driven budget application, it really is a budget and forecasting application,
right,
like you guys are using from us. One of the things I love about that is, instead of the forecasting process having to be this massive Excel thing, it's literally something that you could do quarterly, and it's not painful, right? And if it, the reason we don't do it more frequently in this industry is not because we don't care, it's because it's too painful. So if we can take away that pain and you can do the forecasting more frequently, I would love. It pains me when I see people who basically view budgets as a once a year agony to go through that sets up the contract for people's bonuses, but other than that, it's forgotten about.
Correct.
Right? The notion of like using the drivers of the budgeting process. I was just on Multifamily Matters. I taped it yesterday. It's going to be presented on the radio I think this weekend. But we were talking about like how driver-based budgeting, you can actually use it to manage your business going forward, because you know why you hit or missed a metric.
Right.
Instead of well, I was told to put 95.5 in, so I don't know why we were at 94.9. Right. But if you can say, well, we thought we were going to renew 52%, we only renewed 49. We thought we were going to release in 17 days on average. It was really 21. This is what happened. Right. Yeah. No, that again, that's a fascinating future to me.
Well, and the other component for RedPeak is that when I came back to the company 4 years ago, we started reforecasting just revenue. But the 10th of the month, we were forecasting for the rest of the month. So the teams could start to think about what they needed to do, how many leases, how many renewals they needed to generate to hit their numbers. And it was just such a heavy lift. And going back to our portfolio, one manager may have 15 buildings. That's 15 sets of financials. And then to reforecast revenue on a monthly basis, we thought was really important, especially during the pandemic, because it was moment by moment almost at that point. And then what we came to realize at the end of that, one, we can do that through a forecasting tool. Two, it became less about revenue, even though it makes up a bigger piece of the pie, and more about expense control.
Right.
So,
expense control is very process driven, because if your community manager is piling up invoices to all pay, once a week or once every 2 weeks or at the end of the month, then you're 10 or 15 days into the month and you don't really know what your expenses for the month are yet.
Correct.
So that's fascinating. So we talked about the future, what the future might look like. If somebody on this webinar is listening, or webcast is listening, who's kind of early in the journey or wanting to get onto this journey, what's your advice for where they should start?
With BI in particular?
Yeah, BI and creating a data-driven culture.
I think first and foremost, you've got to find the right partner. There's a lot of BI platforms out there. We did test 2 and maybe 3, and meaning we implemented them and went through months and months of data validation and all of that. I think it's key to pick the right partner. Make sure up front you're speaking the same language, because what we quickly learned was occupancy to X company is very different than how we were calculating it. And we thought we were, pretty much industry standard, and I think we are, but our numbers never matched. So, but I think there's so much data out there. It's so hard to operate these businesses without that at your fingertips anymore. We've got to be nimble. We've got to make changes, especially in a time where you're seeing some economic uncertainty. Anything that helps you make sound decisions is going to become even more paramount. It's easy to look like a rock star when the economy's solid. It's much more challenging to look confident.
Warren Buffett's quote, right? Warren Buffett's quote about, when the tide goes out, you find out who's skinny dipping. That definitely plays.
Yes.
Wait, well, thanks for your insight, Jared. For the last bit of our interview, we're going to switch gears completely and go to what we refer to as a sort of fun little rapid style kind of James Lipton sort of Q&A, if you remember inside the
Okay.
acting studio.
I'm in.
So here we go. So the only rule is don't think too hard. Okay. First, what book has influenced you the most?
I'm one of those people that I do read business books fairly often, and I always go back to what I'm reading now. But
Mhm.
to really think about it and think again about this topic and where we are,
Yeah.
start with the why would be one of them at the top
Yeah.
of the list because listen, I learned a lot in my career. I was
Mhm.
always the person that was plowing forward because I thought everybody would just get excited about a new
Yeah.
direction rather than focusing on the buy-in and the why on the front end we're doing something.
Yeah.
So that would be my first answer.
I'm a big fan of that. Yeah. People can do a lot of things they don't agree with when they understand the why. Next question. What's your favorite time of day?
I am not a huge morning person, although I think I'm, in the small minority, especially in Denver. Everybody seems to
Uh,
be up at 6 a.m.
yeah.
I love the evening, getting
Mhm.
home. For me, it's cathartic to cook dinner with a glass of wine in my hand and just kind of reflect on the day.
Sweet. What's your favorite app?
So from a work perspective, I would have to say, although this is really boring, is Microsoft Teams
Uh-huh.
because that rapid fire communication
Yeah.
has been a lifesaver for my inbox.
Yeah. Cool. What's your pet peeve?
Negativity.
What's your spirit animal? And I always warn people, my marketing VP put that one in.
God, that's the hardest question of all.
Yeah.
Um, Donald, I got to think on that one. See, I'm thinking too hard at
It's
this
okay.
point. Um, I don't know. I'd have to say the elephant because just that memory storage, that memory
Uh-huh.
overall. Yeah,
Yeah.
first to mind.
That'll work. Last two. If you had to pick one food to eat forever, what would you eat?
Pasta
Pasta.
all
And
day.
then last question, what's your go-to for a good laugh?
Oh, one, my 17-year-old for sure. Dry sense of humor, but just super funny. But I would also have to say, within the work family,
Yeah.
I have a lot of funny people here. But Lori Snyder, if you know Lori,
Okay.
she always has a story. There's always something about her chasing a bear. There's always something with her that, she'll come in, and I know the moment she comes into the office because I can hear her singing from the elevator.
Yeah. There you
And then the
go.
stories ensue. So.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for sharing your insights with us, Jared. Where can everybody find out a little bit more about you and about RedPeak?
Sure. RedPeak.com. A lot about the company, about our team, and then I'm always available on LinkedIn. If anybody has any questions or is looking to start this journey, I'm always happy to share what we're doing.
Excellent. Thanks again, Jared.
All right. Thanks, Donald.